Thank you very much. This is April the 27th, Tuesday, and this is The Drill. And welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today on the menu is the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and Chapter 1 from Power Hungry, a book about petroleum, coal, and natural gas. And this is the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for Tuesday, April the 27th. And it is, I will be your refuge from the oppressor. My child, never forget that I am a refuge for you from those who would attempt to oppress you, either from without or from an evil spirit within. I will be your refuge in times of trouble. I will never forsake you when you seek me, and will administer judgment for you because of your uprightness. I am the Lord your God, and I will be with you. I am mighty to save. I take great delight in you, and I will quiet you with my love. I will rejoice over you with singing. I will remove sorrow from you, and will deal with all who oppressed you. I will give you honor and praise among all the people of the earth, and will restore your fortunes before your very eyes. Prayer declaration. Father, you have promised to defend the cause of the weak and fatherless and to maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed. You will rescue the weak and needy and will deliver me from the hand of the wicked that seek to oppress me. You uphold the cause of the oppressed, and you have set me free from oppression. Amen. And so today, like I said, coming up is going to be chapter 1 of the book Power Hungry, and right now, the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Very good. And so now the chapter 1 from the book Power Hungry by Robert Bryson, and it's called Power Tripping 101. We don't give a damn about energy. What we want is power. Differentiating between the two is essential. Here's the simplest way to do so. Energy is the ability to do work. Power is the rate at which work gets done. The more power we have, the quicker the work gets done. And in our speed-obsessed world, we are constantly finding ways to use more power. From a handful of electrons racing through the thinner-than-a-human-hair circuits of a microprocessor to the vast quantities of thrust developed by the jet turbines on a Paris-bound 767. We don't care what energy is, we want what energy does. We would gladly fill our fuel tanks with jelly beans, marbles, or Hostess Twinkies if they could deliver the power needed to propel our Camrys and Suburbans to places like Wasilla or Waxahachie. We aren't after energy, we are after what energy provides. And what energy provides is power. We use energy to make power. We convert energy, measured in barrels of oil, tons of coal, and cubic feet of gas, into power, which we tabulate in watts or horsepower. Much, if not all, of human history can be seen as the pursuit of increasing amounts of power, whether it's the Egyptians and the Mesoamericans coordinating and harnessing hordes of human muscle to build the pyramids, the use of horses in warfare, Hannibal's use of elephants to cross the Alps in 218 BC, the first use of steam to drive a piston, the gallop of General George Patton's tanks across France in the summer of 1944, or the Saturn V rockets, which produced 160 million horsepower or 120 gigawatts, that catapulted American astronauts to the moon. There has been a consistent, millennia-long effort to find and utilize more power. Power allows us to do things that make us happy, wealthy, and comfortable. Power gets us up in the air and down the road. Power fetches the email, makes the coffee, and bakes the cake. Power allows us to cut the grass, roast the turkey, cool the beer, fly to Rome, and of course, keep the lights on. While those facts may seem self-evident, here's the essential truth about our power-driven world. The overwhelming majority of the power we use comes from hydrocarbons because they can provide us with the reliable and abundant power that we desire. Today, 90% of the horsepower we use, or if you prefer, 9 out of 10 watts, come from the burning of oil, natural gas, and coal. And the key attribute of hydrocarbons is their reliability. Renewable energy is dandy, but it simply cannot provide the gargantuan quantities of always available power that we demand at prices we can afford. The production of electricity from the wind and the sun will continue growing rapidly in the years ahead, but those sources are incurably intermittent. As Stuart Brand, the environmental activist and creator of the Whole Earth Catalog, put it during a lecture in mid-2009, quote, wind and solar can help because we don't have a way to store that energy, unquote. Given our inability to store the energy that comes from wind and solar, those sources will remain bit players in our overall energy mix for the foreseeable future. After 2 decades of studying the energy business, I believe those points about energy and power are self-evident. They're not based on ideology. Instead, they're grounded in basic physics and basic math. I'm not opposed to environmental protection. Far from it. I'm a bird watcher and a beekeeper, but now that I've reached middle age, I've finally learned how to use a calculator. Using that device, as well as a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and basic textbooks on physics, has forced me to become a realist on energy issues, and therein lies my frustration. As I've become more pragmatic, our public discourse about energy and energy policy has gone the other way. Discussions about energy matters, which are usually accompanied by arguments about climate change, have devolved into vitriolic, divisive mess where facts and reasoned argument are largely ignored. In their place, we hear vituperative attacks on the deniers, adolescent arguments about whose fault it is or isn't that the climate is changing, and outlandish claims about the speed with which the United States can or should transform its multi-trillion-dollar energy and power delivery systems into greener ones. Scientists, journalists, and analysts who dare question the apocalyptic predictions of the global warming alarmists are likely to feel the electronic wrath of bloggers such as Joe Rome, the self-appointed Savonarola of the Al Gore acolytes. Since September 11, 2001, the United States and the rest of the Western world has been inundated with claims that we should radically change our diet, our energy and power diet, and to do so immediately. We're told that we should abandon our existing systems for something new, something that's low carbon, solar powered, wind powered, or better yet, powered by the energy sector's single most desired element, unobtainium. I like that. It doesn't seem to matter where the new power will come from as much as it does that we all agree that moving to something else, anything else, is a really good idea. We must, we're told, make a hurried energy transition because, A, the United States should be energy independent. Doing so will free us from the vagaries of world energy markets and increase employment here in America. B, we can no longer rely on oil from the Middle East. The suppliers in the region, and Saudi Arabia in particular, are not our friends. And the Second Iraq War provides further evidence of our unhealthy obsession with the region. C, cutting oil use will reduce terrorism. This is a favorite claim of neoconservative politicos such as former CIA Director James Woolsey and his fellow traveler Frank Gaffney, the head of the Center for Security Policy, a right-wing think tank based in Washington, D.C. In January 2007, Gaffney declared that, quote, some of the hundreds of billions of dollars we transfer each year to various petroleum exporting nations wind up in the hands of terrorists. This is not simply an addiction, it's a death wish, unquote. D, hydrocarbons are bad. Using them, says one Sierra Club official, is fossil fuelish. If we don't kick the hydrocarbon habit, we're told disastrous climate change will result. Burning coal, oil, and natural gas releases carbon dioxide, which causes global warming. Therefore, hydrocarbons must be replaced with something else, or we will all burn in hell or something just like it. E, we must quit using oil because we are running out of it. The world will soon reach, or has already passed, its ability to produce increasing amounts of petroleum. This peak in oil production presages a global economic meltdown because we have no substitute for oil. These claims seem plausible, and in some cases they are being put forward by credible people, but they are largely based on faulty assumptions. The promoters of these arguments have gained traction in recent years because the overwhelming majority of the American public simply isn't equipped with the facts. The arguments are often disguised as flag-waving emotional appeals that are accompanied by a big dose of fear. And as a consequence, the U.S. public has been primed to believe that an overhaul of our energy system is not only essential, it's patriotic and spiritually righteous. It's good business, and it will once and for all cure the problems of halitosis and premature baldness. Here's the reality. Whether the issue is oil imports, carbon dioxide emissions, or a peak in global petroleum production, we live in an increasingly interdependent world. With regard to oil and oil imports, the promoters of energy autarky, ignore a myriad of inconvenient truths. Among them, during the first 6 months of 2009, the United States exported an average of 1.9 million barrels of oil per day. At that level, U.S. oil exports are on par with countries such as Angola and Venezuela. Of course, the vast majority of those exports are refined products, not crude. Why has the United States become a major player in the international oil market for refined products? Because the U.S. refineries are among the best in the world, and they can produce the types of fuels the global market demands. Thus, the United States, the world's biggest importer of oil, is also one of the biggest exporters, and has been a major exporter for years. So here's the tip. The next time you hear somebody promoting energy independence, grab your wallet. Whatever they are proposing to achieve, that delusional goal will surely cost you money. As for terrorism, the very nature of the global oil market, the biggest, most integrated, most transparent market ever created, undermines the claim that using less oil will somehow result in a reduction in the tactics of terror. Although it's true that some petrostates have ties to terrorism, Iran being an obvious example, it's just as true that Iran and other oil exporters cannot be isolated from the global oil market. Terrorism isn't an ideology, it's a tactic, a cheap tactic, and it doesn't depend on petrodollars. In May 2009, the RAND Corporation, one of the oldest defense-focused think tanks in Washington, released a report concluding that America's, quote, reliance on imported oil is not by itself a major national security threat, unquote. The report went on to debunk the claim that oil and terrorism are related, saying, quote, terrorist attacks cost so little to perpetrate that attempting to curtail terrorist financing through measures affecting the oil market will not be effective, unquote. Many people may be worried about peak oil, but those concerns frequently ignore the fundamentals of the marketplace. Prices and technology are always combining to unlock hydrocarbons that were once thought unreachable. Let's look at just 1 month, September 2009. During that month alone, several companies announced major oil and gas finds. For instance, BP announced that its Tiber prospect in the Gulf of Mexico may hold more than 3 billion barrels of oil. That well was drilled in 4,100 feet of water to a depth of 35,000 feet. On September 11th, the Spanish energy firm Repsol announced the biggest natural gas discovery in Venezuela's history. The discovery, located in the Gulf of Venezuela in a water depth of about 200 feet, may contain 8 trillion cubic feet of gas, the energy equivalent of about 1.4 billion barrels of oil. 5 days later, Anadarko Petroleum announced the Venus find offshore Sierra Leone, and the company said that the geology of offshore West Africa appears favorable for hydrocarbons along a line some 700 miles long that goes through Liberia, the Ivory Coast, and Ghana. In addition, Petrobras, the Brazilian national oil company, announced yet another major offshore discovery, this one involving a big pool of hydrocarbons underneath more than 7,000 feet of water in the Santos Basin, an area south of Rio de Janeiro. Just for grins, let's suppose that Petrobras and the other big companies decide to suddenly stop looking for more oil. Even if that unlikely event occurred, the world still has about 1.25 trillion barrels of proved reserves waiting to be tapped. That's a lot of petroleum, about 42 years' worth at current rates of production. Sure, the world will one day hit its peak in oil production, or perhaps that peak has already passed. Whatever the case, we will keep using oil for decades to come, and our consumption will rise or fall depending on the price. Commodities have always been rationed by price. Oil is a commodity, and as the price of that commodity increases, the rationing of oil will become more pronounced, and we will be forced to use petroleum more efficiently. Global climate change and carbon dioxide emissions are the causes du jour. There's a widespread belief that if the people of the world do not unite to drastically reduce their carbon dioxide output, then catastrophic climate change will occur. In fact, some environmental activists have decided that the optimum level of carbon dioxide in the global atmosphere should be 350 parts per million. By late 2009, the concentration was about 390 parts per million. On October 24th, 2009, the supporters of the 350 parts per million target conducted more than 4,000 synchronized demonstrations around the world. Their aim? To build a, quote, global community, unquote, to support the 350 ppm goal. The chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said he is fully supportive of that target. In November 2009, former Vice President Al Gore, appearing on The Late Show with David Letterman, declared that unless the people of the world took drastic action to curb carbon dioxide emissions, it could be the, quote, end of civilization as we know it, unquote. Gore may be right. It's also possible that he's wrong. In many ways, Gore's opinion doesn't matter, because no matter how much the United States may want to lead the effort to reduce carbon emissions, it cannot and will not be able to sustainably slow the increasing global use of coal, oil, and natural gas. Why? There's simply too many people living in dire energy poverty for them to forego the relatively low-cost power that can be derived from hydrocarbons. I will discuss carbon dioxide emissions at length in Part 2. For proof of that, consider the per capita carbon dioxide emissions in the world's most populous countries. From 1990 to 2007, the per capita emissions of carbon dioxide in the United States fell by 1.8%. But during that same time period, per capita emissions soared in Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan. Those 5 countries contain more than 3 billion people, and their energy consumption patterns are being replicated in nearly every major developing country on the planet. Let's see. There's a chart here. Well, anyways, that reality was reflected in Copenhagen in December 2009 when leaders from 192 countries met for what was the Associated Press's what they were calling the largest and most important UN climate change conference in history. After 2 weeks of wrangling and lofty rhetoric, the meeting ended with an eminently predictable result. No legally binding agreement on any reductions in carbon emissions, only a promise to reduce emissions individually or jointly, and on an agreement to meet again a year later in Mexico City to discuss all the same contentious issues one more time. In short, all of these concerns from worries that we have reached or will soon reach a peak in oil production and are or will soon be entering a period of inevitable decline to the alarmist cries over impending global warming and the supposed solutions to them hinge on the belief that the transition away from hydrocarbons to renewable sources can be done quickly, cheaply, and easily. That is not true. Tomorrow's energy resources will look a lot like today's because energy transitions are always difficult and lengthy. Quote, there's one thing all energy transitions have in common. They are prolonged affairs that take decades to accomplish, unquote, wrote Vaclav Smil in November 2008. Quote, and the greater the scale of prevailing uses in conversions, the longer the substitutions will take, unquote. Smil, the polymath, prolific author on energy issues and distinguished professor at the University of Manitoba, wrote that while a, quote, world without fossil fuel combustion is highly desirable, getting there will demand not only high cost, but also considerable patience. Coming energy transitions will unfold across decades, not years, unquote. Indeed, energy transitions unfold slowly and are always underway whether we recognize them or not. Between 1973 and 2008, the amount of electricity generated in the United States with nuclear reactors increased by more than 800%. Nuclear power now accounts for about 20% of the electricity generated in America. But for the average homeowner whose immediate interest is in sweeping the carpet or baking a pie, that transition has been invisible. For the consumer, the electricity that comes out of the wall socket is a commodity. How it is generated is of little interest. The key concern for the consumer was, and continues to be, that electricity remain cheap and always available. The $5 trillion per year global energy business dwarfs all other sectors of the economy. Given its size, and given that any major energy transition will take decades, we must carefully analyze the various energy sources to determine which ones can satisfy the four imperatives: power density, energy density, cost, and scale. Using those metrics will help us to confront the brutal facts, winnow out the pretenders, and increase the consumption of the winners. But before we can begin that winnowing process, we must take a look back in order to understand how we got to this place in U.S. energy history. That requires calling out some of the energy posers who claim to have the answers, while also taking a hard look at the underlying causes of America's energy unease. And much of that unease comes from three factors: guilt, fear, and ignorance, the deadly trio that has been incarcerating the human mind for millennia. And that is that concludes Chapter 1 of Power Hungry from Robert Bryson. Excuse me. And so again, I take issue with him reporting that carbon dioxide is a global warming gas. It isn't. The only reason it's called that is because I think the Environmental Protection Agency declared it such. And but it's wrong. And you don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. All you have to do is know and understand that the greenhouse gas theory says that it is gases that get trapped 8 to 11 miles high in the sky that help to keep the earth warm. Okay? And if you know that, and then know that carbon dioxide travels along the ground, then you know that carbon dioxide never has been, isn't now, and never will be a greenhouse gas. Back in a minute. Thank you. Furthermore, on Chapter 1, what it seems to conclude is that all of the efforts that we're making to change to other sources of energy are a waste of time, complete waste of time. They're not going to achieve any of the goals that these people on the left, the Al Gore types, want, the 350 parts per million and all that crap. It's just not going to do it, again, for the reasons that were outlined in Chapter 1. So the question then becomes, what is do the people on the left know this? And if they do, what is their real motivation? I don't know whether they know this or not. They may be just so have brainwashed themselves so thoroughly that they're absolutely convinced that there's magic, that there is unicorns and rainbows, and that they can, by magic and sheer willpower, will things to change around the world. If they do, then the question is, what is their ulterior motive, or their real motive here? And some have suggested that the real motivation might be money transfers, that the United States is a very wealthy country, and the idea is to create some type of a tax, a global tax, and transfer money from the United States to poor countries, Sierra Leone, and perhaps a lot of sub-Saharan African countries, because any deal to lower climate change has got to consider that. All the smaller countries that are developing need oil, need natural gas, and they need coal in order to be able to get to defeat poverty. They need it. And so they're always going to fight any attempt to reduce. So that's where you get into issues of where you're buying and selling pollution credits, carbon credits is what they call it, that kind of thing. So it may be that kind of a scheme, but a lot of questions about if it's ineffective, it's not necessary, and it's not going to produce the results we're looking for anyways, then why do it? So that's one of the things that you can tell your friends, neighbors, relatives when you're talking about energy and power, is that that all the statistics show that we're not going to be able to meet any of those goals worldwide again, because the United States is actually cutting its emissions, but it's offset by poorer countries that are increasing their emissions. So we're probably not going to get there anyways. And so the threat that they're saying is posed is unrealistic anyways. So, but again, refer them to the book if they have any other questions. And but also remember that the left is never interested in getting into an argument or debate about statistics. Nobody on the left is on the left because they want to be they want to spend the rest of their life writing term papers. They're on the left because they think it's fun, they think it's exciting, they think they're going to get the opportunity to wield power and to actually wield power in which you don't have any responsibilities. They get to exercise authority without having to accept responsibility for it. And also remember that they're leaders. This is one of the big leadership things on the left. The left always likes to be leaders. They're dreamers. They're visionaries, or at least they think so. I spend a lot of time posing in the mirror, pretending to be leaders and visionaries. One of the shortcut arguments against them is when they come out and say, gee, we should be doing global warming, is saying, first of all, who's we? Do you have a mouse in your pocket? And remind them that if they want to take steps as an individual to cut their so-called carbon footprint, have at it. Nobody's going to stop them. If they want to put something on the roof, if they want to put a wind turbine or something in their front yard, go ahead. That the problem I've got is with force. The idea that you're going to come along and force me to do what it is that you do. And so I'm telling them, they're not leaders, they're not change agents, and they're not making a difference. That's the shortcut here. You're not a leader, you're not a change agent, you're not making a difference. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill, and until next time, be smart, be beautiful, and be honest. And remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win. Wait a minute here.